Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment, we're going to begin the funeral services of Jordan Kaplan, the Honorable Jordan Kaplan. Please take a moment to be sure that your cell phones and pagers or any noise-making devices are turned off. We welcome those of you who are joining us online. The Kriya ceremony was done earlier this morning, and Cantor Rabbi Rob Jury will be officiating.
Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot Lachen samach libi v'yagel kvodi Af bisari yishkol laveto I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, and I shall not be moved. Therefore my heart can exult, for my soul rejoices. My being is eternally secure, for you do not abandon me to everlasting death, nor let your faithful ones see eternal destruction. You show me the path of everlasting life. Your presence brings fullness of joy, for enduring happiness is your eternal gift. Death has taken away our beloved, the Honorable Jordan Sonny Kaplan. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation, and in their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For it was Jordan's love that united us in life, in which death cannot sever. For his companionship shared along life's paths, which continue now through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart, his mind, of knowing each of you in your own special way, these too continue as precious remembrances. For all of these and more, we give thanks to God. In times of grief, we look for comfort. We look for that ever-new message of nearness. And I invite you to turn into your leaflets with me as we turn to our sacred scriptures for that message. We'll offer the 23rd Psalm together. Let us read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Thinking about this changing world and changing times in our lives, we recall the words of Kohelet, who wrote, "For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sew up, a time for silence and a time to speak." So we speak now like Job, who cried out, "Adonai Natan, v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai mevorach." The Lord has given, the Lord has taken away, as an ancient people of faith, we gather to say, "Blessed be the name of God." Let us take a moment of silent prayer and personal remembrances, remembering some of our favorite and dearest memories of a father, of a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a friend, a colleague, an honorable judge. Let us remember these and lift them in our hearts. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable unto you, our rock and our Redeemer. Together we say, Amen. Before we began, we had those beautiful pictures, and I just couldn't get the vision of him sitting on the back of the motorcycle and that grit. These are the memories. Thank God. Thank God. As we turn to words of hesped, words of remembrance, words of eulogy, we're honored to call up on behalf of all of the grandchildren, representing them, granddaughters, Melissa, Annie, and Samantha as representative of the grandchildren to share some of their memories.
Hello, all. I'm Samantha, and as was said, I'm one of the grandchildren here today that is here to honor and celebrate the life of my grandpa. I have many memories of him, but one of my favorites is when we were all together for the Passover Seder. As we got older, we would take turns reading these passages, but my grandpa was always the original leader. A particularly fun part of the Seder for us kids was the reciting and later singing of Dayenu. While my grandpa didn't lead the singing, he did make sure that we went through each of the times that it would have been enough for the ancient Israelites. It would have been enough if God had taken the Israelites out of Egypt, but not executed judgment on the Egyptians. Dayenu, it would have been enough. It would have been enough if God had split the seas but not drowned their enemies. Dayenu, it would have been enough. And just as the Jewish people long ago experienced both hardships and happiness, my grandpa did as well. Recently, when he was asked about how he was able to bounce back from these tough times, he said, after a moment of consideration, that it was because he remained curious about what was next. With that in mind, I wanted to share a short story that is reminiscent of that resilient mindset that my grandpa carried with him throughout his life. The story starts with a father and daughter standing together at the airport. They had just announced the departure of the daughter's plane. Standing near the security gate, they hugged, and the father said, "I love you, and I wish you enough." They kissed, and then the daughter left. The father walked over to the window where the author of this story was seated, and he turned to the father and asked, "When you were saying goodbye, I heard you say, 'I wish you enough.' May I ask what that means?" The father began to smile. "That's a wish that has been handed down from other generations. My parents used to say it to everyone." He paused a moment and then looked up as if trying to remember it in detail, then smiled even more. When we said, "I wish you enough," we were wanting the other person to have a life filled with just enough good things to sustain them. Then, turning towards me, he shared the following as if he were reciting it from memory. "I wish you enough sun to keep your attitude bright, no matter how gray the day may appear. I wish you enough rain to appreciate the sun even more. I wish you enough happiness to keep your spirit alive and everlasting. I wish you enough pain so that even the smallest of joys in life may appear bigger. I wish you enough gain to satisfy your wanting. I wish you enough loss to appreciate all that you possess. I wish you enough hellos to get you through the final goodbye. Pain in life sooner or later will have an upside, and the highs in life don't last forever, so don't take them for granted. Appreciate every moment. I wish you enough. I know my grandpa lived a life full of enough of the challenges and enough of the good things those challenges made better. And I know he would wish all of you a lifetime of enough.
Hello. Like the rabbi said, I'm Annie, and my sister Melissa's right there. We're also Grandpa's granddaughters. When I was writing this, I first wanted to think of the deep, important things that Grandpa brought to the world: lessons, inspiration, comfort. And he did all that, but when I first think of him, that's not what I think about. First, I think of the small moments, the walks around the mall or the park, watching movies that weren't always quite age appropriate because, well, they were good movies, and taking the quizzes from the Consumer Report magazines and having an older brain than him because I got some of the questions wrong, and simply enjoying each other's company with hot chocolate or mini ice cream cones or whatever other mini dessert he had in his kitchen. When we were growing up, Grandpa liked to play games with us, such as testing our knowledge with spelling or general knowledge quizzes, paying us to eat the hot peppers that came with meals at restaurants, or having us trace letters on his back to pass along a secret message. As we got older, we realized that last game was a way for him to get his back scratched while keeping the kids entertained. And we moved on to knowingly scratching his back, which he probably appreciated more since he could tell us where to scratch. My siblings and I were particularly fortunate in that we lived so close to Grandpa, and we were able to see him on an almost weekly basis for most of our lives. Most Sundays, we, regularly joined by aunts, uncles, cousins, and whoever else felt like joining, would go out to eat together, and not infrequently, one or more of us would return to Grandpa's house with him to spend some more time together. He made a point to show us his favorite Western movies and to expose us to sports, even if they weren't necessarily our thing. And he allowed us to show him some of our favorite shows and movies, such as the Harry Potter series, Gilmore Girls, and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Sometimes whatever we were watching kept our attention, but often the movie or show would be paused every so often, so we could talk or joke about whatever came to mind. Frequently, the time would fly by until Grandpa turned to us to ask, "Where are we eating?" as we had already spent the entire day together and dinner time had approached. Inspired by Grandpa's passion and wisdom, I decided to go to law school like he did, despite his advice varying from, "You'd do well at law school, you should go," to "Absolutely do not go to law school." And I was thrilled that he was able to come out to Cleveland when I was moving in to see my apartment in the area the school was in. I didn't have my ID yet and wasn't able to show him the inside of buildings or much of anything since I didn't know the city. But he was convinced that the city was right, the school was right, the apartment was right, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. People who didn't know him might suggest he would say that wherever I was. But my sister lives in New York City, and whenever the comparison came up, Grandpa would simply say that New York has a lot of trash, because he visited the city during a trash strike, and that is that. But yeah.
I'm so grateful for all the time we were able to have together and for all the amazing memories, from taking road trips to mall walking to movie marathons and talking almost daily through the pandemic. He has always had the time to spend with family. With any problem or inconvenience I've ever had, he was always ready to offer his advice, whether I asked for it or not, and was always available to offer support. I don't have the words to express what a huge part of my life he has been in so many ways. We all miss him so much.
Like Melissa said, it's impossible to put words what a great impact Grandpa made on me or all of us, or how much I love him, miss him. He always talked about how much he loved our family and how important family is, so I suppose the fact that I couldn't bring myself to say goodbye even when I was writing this shows how deep that sentiment has ingrained itself in me. So I'll just finish us off with saying, I love you, Grandpa, and I'll see you next time.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's now my honor to invite up Jordan's children, Marty, Lou, and Julie, to share in their reflections and their memories together.
So, thank you, Rabbi. In addition to Lou, Julie, and I'd like to say that though Joe, or four of us, isn't physically here, I believe he's here, and he is with us. So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, I think he would agree with. He'd probably have a few to add, but welcome to family, friends, acquaintances. We're really happy that you're here to pay respects and most importantly to celebrate Dad's life. And bear with me here because I've got bullet points and I'm going to move all over the place a little bit and we're going to chime in with one another. But I think you'll get the essence of what Dad meant to us, and some of the dadisms, we're going to bring them up too. And you know, the question comes up, are you Jordy? Well, I'm not. We look alike. But I can tell you I've been blessed with a lot of his good and some of the things that are a little challenging at times. But he and I were very much wired similarly. But I can tell you Dad was the rock, is the rock. And here's what I mean by that. So first memory is that really I've got a dad. When I was young, I got to step back to step forward in the conversation. I had eye operations, 2 of them, cross-eyed, strabismus. When they put you out for those surgeries then, it was ether, nasty stuff. And I woke up unable to see with bandages on the eyes. And I remember I'm being attacked by snakes. I got animals, I got things that are just eating me up as I was waking. And I can hear my dad's words slowly coming in out of the background, comforting me post-eye operation. And he was able to bring me back to consciousness in a way that I felt comforted, secure, and safe. And I look back at that to say, if I think throughout the years, comforting, safe, Dad was that. He was the rock. Dad, you know, if you come to Shiva, maybe we'll tell some Dad stories, but Dad had he had a wonderful upbringing with family. Dad also, like me in particular, had some challenges as a kid, getting into trouble and doing some things that he probably shouldn't do. More than once he had said, you know, I understand what you are doing, and I did it worse, right? So some of that stuff would come out. But I recall one time where I really upset my mom, and I did that frequently, just doing stupid stuff. And Mom said, Jordy, you got to take him out. You got to spank him. And spanking was acceptable, I guess, back then. But he took me out to the garage. I already had a book in my pants, you know, thinking I'm going to get walloped. And he said, all right, I am not going to spank you. You don't do that again, but I want you to scream like I spanked you. So, and you know, screaming, we came in, Mom was fine, but that didn't happen. He didn't want to hit me. But he understood why I did what I did. He had been there. Dad, if I think of me today, and I think of my life skills, you know, I've had 15 different careers probably. It started with him though, and it started with Marty, probably maybe 5 years old. Help me repair the headlight on the Dodge Coronet. Here's the screwdriver, here's how you do it, right? He showed me, but then he trusted in me to let me do it. He'd even screw up and strip the screw or whatever it may be, but it was from then on, it was really formative for me to help me build the skills to take things on, to take projects on, to fix things. And it formed the basis, really, candidly, for a career. As we grew a little bit older, some of the favorite things that Dad and I would do together, you may not have been born yet, you were pretty young. we would go on Friday nights to Sears. And you could substitute Sears with Montgomery Ward's or J.C. Penney. And where we would go is the tool section. Our dad loved him a good tool. And well, I don't want to take you downstairs when we do Shiva. You don't want to see what it looks like down there, but there's lots of tools downstairs. But the biggest highlight for me and for him, candidly, and this will come out, I think, in our conversations from Sears, was the sweets, the candies. Sears used to have a candy counter right in the middle of it. And when we would go, it was two things typically. It was fruit slices. God, he loved fruit slices. And nonpareils, right? The chocolates with the little white things on there. Get them all over the place. But man, we would be eating those. But that was never enough because in Skokie or in Old Orchard or Golf Mill, actually not far from here, we had Peacock's ice cream, which was to him the best ice cream, highest butterfat content, right? Because Dad knew those things. We would go get coffee ice cream. So our Fridays were an ability to look at new tools, maybe buy a few new tools, go eat sweets. And again, for Dad, that was the bee's knees. But I also look, and I'm looking at Brendan right now, appreciation for music. Dad, again, in the house, you'll see 8-tracks, cassettes, you'll see albums in there. He listened to music occasionally. He loved him a good Benny Goodman or Frank Sinatra, Philip Sousa, you know. He was interesting in his selection. But at age 13, he bought me my first stereo, an MCS stereo, which enabled me, right? He enabled me to listen to music. And I know I got Ken and Tony in here somewhere. The music was, there you are. We played it pretty loud in the house, and he allowed that to happen. What's crazy about that is that same stereo receiver that enabled my music, Brendan now has and uses, I think, daily, right? So that's been handed down. There's been some tough times in life. I was blessed to be able to work from age 12 all the way throughout. I worked with Lou at Accenture for 16 years, was in California for a little while. Accenture grew tiring, and I decided, you know, time for a change, and higher education was also my thing. And I thought, you know what, I want to go back to higher ed. This is in the Chicago area, and against Dad's better judgment, I ended up he said, I took a job with, you know, City Colleges of Chicago, was vice chancellor for the system. He said, you don't want to do that. It's politics. It's politics. This is not a good thing to do. He knew politics intimately in the city of Chicago. That role lasted, I don't know, maybe 2 years. State cut funding, and the role got cut. And I found myself for the first time, really in life, unemployed, and was unwilling really to take any old job. Dad was there, even though he told me, don't take the job. He was there with unconditional support to support our collective family for about, you know, a year and a half, 18 months, financially, to make it through. But, you know, again, no questions on it. It's what do you need? It's not do you need anything. It's what do you need? He knew that. He knew I was struggling. Thankfully, was able to finally get my footing and get the career back on track again. Communication, relationships, empathy. And Julie and Lou will talk, but Dad had an innate ability to meet people where they were at. And what I mean by that is I'm very different than Lou, than Joe, than Julie, right? My interests were different. They were certainly different in high school. But Dad found a way to engage. He found a way really to make you feel special. He would ask questions, and he was curious. He was continuously curious. Always wanted to know. Unconditional acceptance, generous love, support, and wisdom. Whether it be, you know, school, jobs, relationships, it didn't matter to him. He wanted his kids safe. He knew his kids loved him, and we did, and we do. But, you know, there were no conditions that ever came with that. Food. Okay, food's a big one with him. Again, I spoke about the sweets a little bit earlier. You know, sweets then, right? So the peacocks, the Sears, the fruit slices. Now, lately, upon nearing his death, it was Julie and Annie and the kids making phosphates for him, and ice creams, and he loved his fruit slices still to the end. He wouldn't eat a dinner. He couldn't eat a dinner, but man, he would chow that stuff down really, really well. Finally, Dad, the teacher, right? As I look back through him in life, he taught. And he wouldn't consider himself a teacher, I don't think, but he absolutely was a fantastic teacher. Marty, come, help me write checks, right? He'd do the bills monthly, and I think the bills are still on the, oh, we cleaned the table off, but I think they were still on the table in the dining room, but he would have us write checks and do the reconciliation there to learn. Here's how you pay stuff, and you know what? Stuff's not free. So understand that there's a cost to things. Mechanical in the cars, though he wasn't a technician, here's a guy, if you go down and look in his bookcase, he rebuilt tube TVs as a hobby, right? And he's still got the books down there, he's got the tools for it, but he taught me too the very basics of mechanics, which ignited my fire, right? He's trying to ignite fires, I think, in each of us. Woodworking. In the bedroom downstairs, we got that shelving unit. Dad was so tickled with that because he bought the shelves for $2 each on clearance and found a way to put them all together with his saw. You know, he's got this big radial arm saw downstairs, and that was the coolest thing to him. He loved the devilish side of him. Joe would be sleeping downstairs. There's a downstairs bedroom. We got our bedroom down there. He'd love to turn that radial arm saw on at 6:30 in the morning. Wake up, everyone. Time to wake up. You know, it was his way of just kind of getting back. He was, I'll call him frugal. He loved buying. Buying, shopping was a sport for him. Yeah. To him, the Bible for shopping was Consumer Reports. You'll go downstairs, you'll see 65 years. He kept every one of them. He kept everything, actually. So 65 years of Consumer Reports just hanging down there. Dadisms, writing notes, reminders on everything. He was really fond of writing notes on paper plates. He's got a paper plate holder in the kitchen. He would write notes, phone numbers, names, whatever he felt was really important. You couldn't have a sandwich on a paper plate without having a dad note on it. He kept everything that was paper. He felt it was important. That was partially the attorney in him, but he didn't want to lose anything. There's boxes and boxes still of paper. He loved dental picks. He's being buried with dental picks in his pocket, by the way. You know, the little flossers. Those, I mean, just constantly chewing on those, gnawing on those. He loved the retinal doctor. We got about 100 pairs, if anyone wants some, of those free, really cool Back to the Future sunglasses. These are dadisms. He felt it important to take one every time he left. He was notorious for answering the phone on the potty. Probably, Melissa, you probably got the bulk of that. But he was notorious for not telling you when he was on the potty. When you knew he was on the potty, you could hear the echo in the bathroom. He would always notice a beautiful woman. He was complimentary, even at the end with the nurses and nursing staff. He would MacGyver solutions. So here's what I mean by this. Dad loved to take materials, he had a lot of materials, building materials in the house, and use them for other purposes. So today, if you go to Shiva, you'll see on the back door, he had a rusted storm door made out of steel. You'll see cove-based molding riveted to it, right, to hide the rust. Similarly, 72 Olds Toronado I had was rusting out in the back. I thought, oh, this is a perfect use for cove-based molding. Cove-based molding, you guys had that car, I think, for a little while. You'll see a soccer ball on the back light. What's the soccer ball doing on the back light? It's to keep the birds from nesting. There was a bird's nest there. But he would go on and just very creative, and to him, that was the coolest thing. If he can come up, find a solution for things with common household items. When Dad lived in our home 3 months ago, he lived, we had him about 3 months, I think, through January, so probably, I don't know, November through January. We've got 3 dogs in the home. And when we came in, one of the little one's a Dachshund, the other one's a Mississippi mud dog, and then we got a Portuguese water dog. He looked at Gary, the little dog, and said, 100 dogs on the dog list, he is number 100 ugliest. Gary is ugly. Now, he said that, right? He lived in the home for a little while, and Gary and him became buddies. Gary slept under the covers with him every night for 3 months. He looked at Angie and I, and he said, you know, smartest dog, Gary is number 1 on that list. And Gary's going to be able to talk in 10 years. He felt Gary was that smart. This dog can talk. He can talk to me. He was always asking about others, asking about how Angie's mom was doing and others. Give her a kiss, and he meant that. He truly was thoughtful about everyone, all of his grandkids, all of his friends, continuously on his mind and wishing nothing but good things. He and I would spar. He loved having a verbal spar with me. I would take the left, he would take the right. One would say black, one would say white, but in the end, we'd come together in the middle. To him, it was sport, and that's part of his legal career was perfect for him because the arguments were awesome. And finally, he loved movies. He loved the IMAX movies. We took him to the Milwaukee Museum, and he just loved seeing lava flows and green fields. And I think the last movie he watched was John Wayne, The Shootist, where John Wayne was going out on his own terms. And in the end, that's what Dad wanted. He really did. It was a rough few months, but I truly believe he is in a much better place now, and he's comfortable. I don't know what you guys want to add.
Yeah. No, thanks, Martz. So I'm just going to fill in some more about our dad. And as Marty said, this really is a celebration of life. I mean, he lived 92 years. He worked till he was 81 years old, full time, right? And he left a huge legacy for us and our family to try to live up to. I remember he was telling me a story. This was actually fairly recently when his father passed away. I was only 6 or 7 years old. It was Grandpa Mike. He was asked to eulogize his father, and he had to think of one word to eulogize his father, and he chose the word tolerant. His dad was a very tolerant person, passed that on to us. So it got me thinking, like, what is our dad's superpower? All right, what am I going to talk about? And there's so many words, family man, selflessness, service, unconditional love, generosity, integrity, problem solver, ethical, spiritual. I mean, he lived those. He lived them. We could talk for hours on those things. The two that I thought that I would kind of key on a little bit are fortitude and service. On fortitude, and you guys, a lot of your family, you know the stories, right? His sister died tragically when she was 36 years old. My mom died at 67 from cancer, a long bout with cancer. My brother died at 55 from a long bout of cancer, and he had to lead the family through those times. He was the rock. And as I think you heard the grandkids there, it was about his, I think Samantha said it was, the reason he continued on was to be that role model for us, but he was curious on what was going to come next. He could have dialed it in, he could have slowed down, he could have stopped, but he just kept going. He formed new relationships with new people. He outlived most of his friends. He was a rock. He was a rock. He had so much fortitude. I firmly believe his spirituality helped fuel his fortitude. We found some of his journals going through his materials the other day, but in late teens, in the early 20s, he in his journal, he wrote about praying to God intently for marriage, children, and some success in a career. Julie, I think you put this in the obit, which is, if you haven't read the long obituary and legacy, read it. It captures so much of our dad. But he had this vision of climbing stairs on the outside of a government building with a briefcase in his arm, right? He was praying for that as a teenager in his 20s, right? And then as a youngster, I was probably 7 years old. This was after his dad died. He would pull me, and maybe you, Marty, I don't remember. I just remember standing in his bedroom, which faces east, by the way, and he would say Kaddish every day for his dad. And he would encourage us to join in, and he would explain the meaning of Kaddish and why it was important. We'd always have to wear yarmulke. And then later, probably in our teens, he would sit on the couch in the family room. I just remember him with his arms around us, going through, talking about the Shabbat prayers and talking to us about his views of Judaism, one God, frequent prayer, serving others. And then in his last days, so fast forward now to like days ago, right? In his last days, he would be in his bed or he'd be in his wheelchair, eyes closed, and he was just praying, and he was being thankful to God. He was saying, thank you, and he said this multiple times, thank you, God, for giving me a wonderful life and family. Even in his last days, as he knew he was passing, he was affirming God's greatness, and he was thankful for what he had and what he did in this life. His nickname growing up was Sonny. I'm going to talk about selflessness a little bit. His nickname growing up was Sonny. And I never understood the spelling. Was it S-O-N-N-Y or was it S-U-N-N-Y? Right? Because both of them apply to him because he was a spirit, right? He would energize you. And he was just a great caretaker. So he was always there for family, right? His mom came from a family of 7, so it was a very wide and then deep family. So he was a playmate, with his cousins and nieces and nephews, and he was a playmate, he was a babysitter, he was an informal teacher. He was a doting son. He adored his mom, my grandma Mary. He was very close to her, convinced her to move closer to him so that she lived in the city along the lakefront, and convinced her to finally move closer to him so that he can care for her even better. His sister, who died tragically at 36, had 3 kids. And when their father passed, he basically took them on like their own kids and provided financial, emotional support. Paul's here today. So he supported them in all facets of their lives. He was selfless in his jobs, in private law, in the village. He was the village attorney for Morton Grove. He was very active in the village politics. He was behind the scenes. He wasn't looking for the glory. He wasn't the guy, hey, I'm going to be mayor, I'm going to run on the board. He was behind the scenes operating, architecting, making sure that whatever he was involved with was successful. He wanted to be the architect. He wanted to be the person solving the problems and moving things in the right direction. As a judge, man, I think we all had the opportunity to observe him in the courtroom. I mean, he operated that courtroom. I mean, it was his courtroom. And he was domestic relations, right? So you're dealing with child custody, you're dealing with child support. Could be nasty stuff, right? He would control his courtroom, but he'd always be fair to the people. And he'd always tell us, it's all about the kids, right? I'm making the decisions on what's best for the kids. But he also would talk to us, and we would observe it. He was preserving the integrity of the mom and the dad that were in that courtroom. He wanted them to maintain their integrity throughout the process. He told me, probably told you the story about this one guy where my dad had to issue a pretty rough judgment against him, child support, whatever. And the guy walked out of the front of the courtroom, slammed the door behind him, maybe mouthed off a little bit about what my dad had just done to him. And my dad's deputy, right? There's a deputy in every courtroom with the gun, starts running after the guy. My dad grabs him and says, you do not go after that guy. My dad had a ton of empathy. He knew that this guy just had a very hard thing happen to him, and he wanted this guy to be able to blow off steam and not make things worse. He was thinking about another person. He was thinking about this guy, and that's the way he ran. That's the way he ran his court. That's the way he ran his life. He was I can't think of a more empathetic person than our dad. He was generous. I want to talk a little bit about his generosity just really quick, and I'm going to turn over to Julie. There is so much material. We could talk. We could talk for hours on this stuff, but he was so generous, not just financial. You heard about some of the financial stuff, but he was generous with his time. He was generous with making connections. I mean, let's talk about time, right? Meeting people just to listen to their problems. We've got friends, family, friends of family. He would meet with them just to give them his advice. Making connections, helping people find jobs, helping people with shopping, helping them get their home projects done. When people needed money in a pinch, he would help. But most importantly and most admirable to me is he didn't wait for people to come to him. He would observe family or friend situations. He would just be listening in. And if somebody had some type of hardship, he would just jump in and help and offer however he could do it. And it was amazing to me. That was our dad, putting others first, being selfless, and not always waiting to be asked to offer up help. Julie, I'll let you go because we'll be here forever. Come to Shiva. I got more stories. I could talk forever. All right.
So, hard acts to follow. Can't overestimate the voids in our lives with our dad gone. He's been such a huge influence. And yet, I do feel so blessed that he was alive for 92 years. We have these stories. We really, and I feel so, and it does give me a lot of, it helps a lot to know that he lives such a full and rich life. And I'm going to end this with just 2 stories. The first kind of follows up on what Lou was talking about, how generous Dad was and how he was able to help us before we even asked for help. He would, not just us, with everyone. He was always looking at other people and thinking about what they were going through and thinking about how he might be able to help them. Well, with us, we'd been talking for years about getting a dog. And some of you have heard this story before. And it was always a bad time. You know, we were always dealing with something else, something was complicated, something difficult in our life. Annie never gave up. She'd still ask every day, can we have a dog? Can we have a dog? Can we have a dog? And at one point I told Dad, I said, you know, I think we're about ready to get a dog. I feel like I could handle a 4th child, which is what I always told the kids. When I'm ready to have a 4th child, then we'll get a dog. And so it was Hanukkah. We were getting ready for a big extended family Hanukkah party. I was in the middle of making latkes, which if any of you have done, it's a major production. And I get a call from Dad. And he was out mall walking with his very good friend Don Snyder at Northbrook Court, and there was an animal shelter, had Orphans of the Storm, had some dogs there in like an area to try to encourage people to adopt a dog. And he's calling me from there. He said, Julie, I have the perfect dog for you. There's a dog here. She's only a year and a half, and she's part Bichon, part Poodle. She's hyperallergenic. She's so good. She came right up to me and was licking my hand. And I said, Dad, that sounds like a wonderful dog, but I mean, I'm in the middle of getting ready for the Hanukkah party. I can't run out there and adopt a dog. And he said, okay, got it. Went back to what I was doing. 2 hours later, he calls and he said, I adopted the dog for you. And I said, and the kids all heard me. They were in the next room. I said, Dad, that is the craziest thing you've ever done in your entire life.
Did you use the word crazy?
I did.
Wow.
I did. But Dad, I think you're here with us. You were right. You were right. He told me sometime recently when we were talking about it, he said, you would have always found an excuse not to get the dog. And you know what? Not that getting a dog is a problem, but it added love. It added another level of love and companionship to our lives and a blessing to our family. And Dad, you were absolutely right, even if it is a little crazy to adopt for someone else. So there's that story. And the other story that I want to leave you with that kind of blends on a lot of the things that both Marty and Lou have talked about is it was when I was really little, I hated going to religious school. Hated it. I think a lot of it was I just didn't like the kids in my class. I can't remember exactly why I hated it so much. But my parents had a terrible time getting me out of bed to go to Sunday school. And one day my mom, I think, got everyone else in the car and said, Jordy, she's your problem. Figure it out. And so Dad tried a little longer to try to get me to get out of bed, get dressed. Wasn't working. And he said, okay, then you're going to have a lesson with me. And so we went downstairs, and he took out an English transliteration of the Torah. And he said, okay, we're going to read it together. And we did. And we discussed it afterwards. And as both my brothers attested, Dad can make you feel like you're the only one in the world. He listened to he was asking me questions, listening to everything I had to say, teaching things that his beliefs about it. He didn't make me want to go to Sunday school. He made me want to continue to just have lessons with him. But the thing that really sticks with me the most, and it sticks with me now in particular, was his absolute sense of awe that every major religion in the world developed independently some variation of the golden rule. And he was in awe of that. He said, so why can't we all get along? You know, we all came up with this independently. And so he taught me so much, but I think that and just the whole concept of being a good person, just to be a good person, and family and love. I mean, you know, he had a wonderful life, and he loved all sorts of things. He had all kinds of interests. But the thing that was remarkable to me about him, that I think about all the time as I go through things in life, is keep your eye on the ball. What's really important here? Is it getting a new car? Is it, you know, going out to eat at a nice restaurant? Those are all great. That's fine. Those are good. He enjoyed them. But what's really important? Love, family, friendship, loyalty. Those are the things that are so important, and those are the things that that I thank God for giving me such a wonderful father. And thank you all for being here. Thank you. Thanks.
Through these memories, today we have mourned the loss and celebrated a life of a father, a grandfather, a great-grandfather, a judge, a friend, an uncle, and all around mensch, the life of the Honorable Jordan Kaplan. Through these beautiful memories, we have gotten to hear snippets of stories to help connect us back to his love, to connect him back in our hearts. I have 3 pages I'm not going to read. And so instead I'm going to tell you one story and close. There's so many beautiful stories. The judge was the kind of guy who cared more about what was going on for you than anything else. So I went to meet him at the facility where he was recovering in. And he's sitting there, and we sit down, and of course he is ready to strike up a conversation, do a little kibitz, a little schmooze, and he sees out of the corner of his eye something has fallen. And he tries to get up from the chair that he is, we're like, oh, please, do not get up. But it's fallen, let me get it for them. All he cared about was helping other people and putting their needs first. That's who he was to the core. And that is the kind of legacy and love that he leaves behind now. So as he joins his beloved wife, Judy, their dear and beloved son, Joe, and all of the memories that they're having together in heavenly realms, along with those who've gone before them into the heavenly realms, they leave behind a legacy. He leaves behind a legacy of love. Jordan leaves behind a legacy of love to his loving children, to Martin and his loving wife Angela, to Julie and her loving husband Robert, to Lou and his loving wife Monica, and to his loving daughter-in-law Florence. He loved all of you so much. You brought such joy into his life and gave him purpose after tragedy and tragedy to keep going, to love and to care. Grandpa leaves behind a legacy of love to his grandchildren, of whom he is so proud, to Michelle and her loving husband Josh, to Matthew and his loving wife Jessica, to Sarah, Joshua, Brendan, Melissa, Anne, Michael, Samantha, Amanda, Brett, Jeremy, and Meryl, each of whom had their own special relationship with their grandpa, each of whom knew what it felt like to be the only person in the room when he showed you his love. Great-grandpa leaves behind a legacy of love to his cherished Joanna and Marshall, his great-grandchildren. It says in Yiddish that children are the crown of your elders. Oh, but to see that smile when great-grandchildren were there, forget it. Those were the glittering jewels. He leaves behind a legacy of love to his nieces, his nephews, his cousins, his dear friends. This is a man who was well loved and loved everyone in this room and beyond so very much. In the words of Rabbi Milton Steinberg, we say, may God help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the pain which a loss inflicts is the measure of a love that is stronger than death. May we learn to hold on with open arms to the love that we had for him and the love we know he will always have for each and every one in this room and beyond, so that we can bring honor to his memory. May his memory forever be a blessing. Together we say, Amen. If you're able to rise, I invite you to do so physically or in your hearts as we offer the prayer that ushers Jordan's soul up into heaven. Hail Melei Rachamim, Shochen Bamramim, המצא מנוחת נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה עם קדושים טהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת זלמן בן מאיר שהלך לעולמו בעול הרחמים יסתירכו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכביו ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Jordan, known in the house of Israel as Zalman ben Meir, who has entered into eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bonds of everlasting life. For God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. Together we say, Amen. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at West Lawn Cemetery, located at 7801 West Montrose in Norridge. The family will be returning to the Kaplan residence on North Moody Avenue at 8934. That's in Morton Grove. Please see the times on the service folder. Also, memorial contributions to JUF would be appreciated. For those of you who are joining us via live stream, all that information, Shiva, and donations you can find on our website. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. When you're going through the intersections, please use your horn liberally as you're going through. Really lay on the horn, and please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. At this time, I invite Honorable Jordan Kaplan's grandchildren and even great-grandchildren to come forward to serve as pallbearers as we escort his casket from the chapel, and then everyone else may return to your cars. Please rise. Ladies and gentlemen, you may return to your cars.